Do you have lots of good resources to do with your family during the 8 nights of Hanukkah? I would like to share what we do with our family on day 2 of Hanukkah. So, on the second night of Hanukkah, we really enjoyed talking about how the faithful people of Israel guarded the Torah during the times that they had to hide from their enemies, as well as the importance of guarding the Torah in our everyday lives today. That's so important to pass on to our children. We also like to have some fun games and activities that we can play during Hanukkah to remind us of all the historical events that take place. Hi, my name is Ann Elliott. I'm the creator and founder of HomeschoolingTorah.com, and I'd like to talk to you about what you could do on the second night of Hanukkah. The theme for this night at our house is guarding the gates, and we begin by reading the book of the Maccabees. And as I've told you in some other videos, you can get the book of the Maccabees from some online resources. Some good ones might be the World English Bible. Another one would be the Complete English Bible, which it was published in 2011. It is a little bit more updated and easier for children to understand. You can get them places like YouVersion or Bible Gateway. So, for the second night of Hanukkah, you might want to begin by gathering your family around and reading from the book of First Maccabees. Start in chapter 2, verse 27, and continue reading all the way through chapter 4, verse 35. And here are some things to keep in mind as you read. And you might want to just park here and discuss each of these things. For instance, you want your children to get down the names of all of Mattathias' 5 sons, okay? They're a little tricky to say. They're Greek names, not Hebrew, so practice those, okay? Talk about what it would be like to hide in the desert, especially if your enemies are chasing you. You can talk a little bit about how it's similar to the game of hide and seek, except that it's very deadly. If someone finds you, you're dead. So you learn to be very creative. And maybe it would be fun if you have really young children to actually play the game of hide and seek. According to 2 Maccabees 5:27, and you'll have to flip over to there, what did they eat in the wilderness? And if your children are older and you have the time, you might want to read 2 Maccabees chapter 8 because it gives additional details here. And then talk about how long would we want to get along on the kind of food that they ate in the desert while they were hiding from their enemies and protecting the Torah. 2 Maccabees 8, verses 21 to 23 describe a watchword or a password that they had to use to identify loyal brothers from their enemies. Their password in English would be Eliezer. In Hebrew, we would say Eliezer, or my God is my helper. Okay? And you can look that up in Strong's. It's Hebrew number 461, and it's a really interesting discussion to have. Where else is it used in our Bible? That's a great word. Now, you might want to finish out by flipping to the New Testament and reading 1 Corinthians 15, verses 12 through 28, Romans 14, verses 8 and 9, and John 16:33, and talk about why should we not be afraid of persecution? What are some of the reasons given in those verses? And how did Paul and Silas act when they were thrown into prison for preaching about Yeshua, the Messiah? You can read about that in Acts 16, verses 20 through 25, and compare how did these first century believers act compared to those in the time of the Maccabees, which came earlier. Do you think that Paul and Silas, who grew up learning about the Maccabees, might have been inspired by the Maccabees and how they acted during times of persecution? Don't forget that this week you might have a memory verse. At our home, we do Zechariah 4, verse 6 during Hanukkah, and it says, "Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, says Yehovah Tsevaot." Now, tonight, if you want to kind of reinforce that verse, because it's day 2, you want to take the verse and write in huge letters on some big pieces of paper and really make the verse big and make banners, so to speak, and then decorate around the words with some battle scenes and talk about how did Yehovah protect his people. Now, I just want to give you a little historical tidbit. The Dreidel game is one of the most famous of all Hanukkah traditions. We find out from one 19th century rabbi that the Jews supposedly played the dreidel to fool the Greeks so that if they were caught studying the Torah, they could switch quickly to the game of dreidel because the Torah study had been outlawed. We are also told that the children would sit at the entrances to the caves in the wilderness while their fathers were gathering around inside the cave studying the Torah. If the soldiers started coming, the children could run from their game of Dreidel that they might have been playing at the entrance and warn their fathers. Now, that's the story. However, there's no evidence that that actually happened. Now, on one hand, you could tell your children the legend and then say, what games could you play if you were bored while needing to stand guard, over your parents who were studying the Torah deep inside a cave? You could have someone yell out Eliezer or Eliezer if you were in English at random times, at which time everyone would have to stop their board game and run and go hide, sort of like hide and seek. That would be fun, but you might also want to point out that the actual game of Dreidel doesn't have the best of origins. From what we could tell, it basically has roots in German Christmas traditions from the 1600s, not from the time of the Maccabees. And it has Kabbalistic meanings to each of the letters on the sides of the Dreidel, and those have pagan Babylonian origins. So at our home, we don't actually play the game of Dreidel. We just try to stick to something that doesn't have those kinds of origins. We don't participate in those things. But yeah. So anyway, that is a little bit of historical tidbit about the game of Dreidel. So those are some fun ideas for your second night of Hanukkah. I got each of those ideas from an ebook. It's called Remembering Hanukkah, a Homeschooling Torah Unit Study, and it's available to you too. I printed mine out. You can find one at homeschoolingtorah.com/Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah, everybody.